Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard. I went from being a lawyer and partner at one of the largest firms in America to becoming an online personality and successful entrepreneur. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your health and personal life. So, how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you chase joy while achieving success? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back to Hustle and Flow. I am your host, Heather Hubbard. We are on episode 257, and today I have a fabulous guest with us, Cher Hale. She is the founder and director of Ginkgo PR, an agency that uses public relations to create a more equitable media landscape, which of course we need. As a Taiwanese Black American woman, Cher is passionate about reclaiming power from the media by taking back narratives that have been silenced, distorted, or misused. Through podcast tours and thoughtful editorial placements from The Today Show to Marie Claire, she creates space for authors and entrepreneurs to tell their stories with their own voices. Cher, welcome to Hustle and Flow.
I'm happy to be here, Heather.
So share with us, how did you get into PR?
By accident, as some of the best things happen. I
Yes.
was in Running Start at the time, which was like college, high school. I enrolled for a class, and the professor was an adjunct teacher. And at the end of semester, asked me to be her intern for a book that she was self-launching. And I thought, I don't know what any of these tasks mean, but let me give it a try. So she taught me how to craft media lists. Back then, we used to actually call producers. So I was like, I don't know, 18, 17, calling producers in New York City at 4 a.m. in Las Vegas. And I was amazed that you could ask somebody to put you on TV. And if you had a good enough idea and some credentials, that they would say yes. And I could not believe the power that you could wield with a simple email or a simple phone call. And that really hooked me into the PR world.
And so how long have you been doing it now?
12, 13 years? Something
Amazing.
upwards of a decade. Who knows the years as they pass
Um,
anymore?
And has it evolved over the years who you work with, or have you really been doing the same bread and butter the whole time?
I'll be honest with you, it has evolved deeply because back in the day, I was working primarily with white, upper middle class female life coaches. They
Yep.
were just referring me to all of their friends, and it was great because I was a brand new business owner, and I thought, Who am I to say no to this work?" But after a while, it began to get really, it felt stale, it felt stagnant, and I couldn't put a finger on why. And then unfortunately, my mother, at the time who was 49, passed from a heart attack.
Oh,
And in the years, I would say 4 to 5 years leading up into her death, she had gotten really into writing this trilogy, this beautiful trilogy of romance novels set in the Umbrian countryside in Italy. And I would edit these books for her, and we would discuss like publishing them and her dreams for what she would do with these stories. And unfortunately, she never published those books. And after she passed, I just kept thinking, wow, like I have all of the skills to help people like her and like myself uh, build the capacity and the skill set to tell our stories in the mainstream media, and I haven't
mhm.
been doing that. So I
Mm.
had to take a really hard look at myself and my habits and my life and decide to slowly and incrementally change how I was doing business. So I pulled all the focus away from that initial subset of clientele and put all of my focus on under-recognized populations. So people who are queer, neurodiverse, disabled, um, and then BIPOC individuals as well.
And when did that shift happen?
Mm, that might have been a year or two, about a year after she passed away, so 2019.
So, and before I've got more questions, but have you done anything with the books?
You know what? This is just like the most magical little nugget of inspiration. I did go back to her novels, her manuscripts,
Yeah.
maybe 2 years ago. And I kept trying to, I was like, I'm going to publish these. Because I'm a writer. I love to write and I love to write fiction. But I hadn't in a long time. And I thought, this is what I'll do. I'll publish her books in her memory. And the more I edited the books, the worse they got. I just could not keep the integrity of the story or the characters. And I
Yeah.
thought, these are not my books to
Mm.
edit. But in the process of doing that, I remembered how much I love to write fiction. And so I've since written my own manuscript, and I'm in my third rewrite right now. So it's been like it was such a gift from her to bring me along even after she was gone.
Oh, how exciting. Yeah, it almost sounds like those books were just for you and to help you launch your own. Okay, well, we are rooting you on for to get that published. So speaking of getting underrepresented voices in media, I feel like with just so much of the world in general and power in general, it's often who you know. So, and it sounds like you're saying that, like, from the very first pitch you ever made, it was you don't necessarily have to have connections. You've just got to have a really good angle and a really good pitch, and you can still get a seat at that table. Is that what you have experienced? Or do you see any kind of pushback when having, someone other than a typical white voice, on paper or on the podcast mic or on TV?
Yes, I hear your question. It's a very valid concern. There's definitely a myth in the public relations space that you have to have a really thick black book to land any kind of press, and I found that that's just not true. And while a black book is certainly helpful, if you have one, yes, have a publicist, let them help you, use your connections. It's definitely helpful. I've made my entire career on pitching cold and doing it really, really well. Because, like you said, if you have, I think, a warm disposition, so a good way to establish rapport at the right angle at the right time, and a guest who really does have credentials and something to say, you can absolutely hear a yes.
Well, I have to say from personal experience, you pitched one of your clients to me. And I think I responded back and said, that's the best pitch I have ever received in like the 8 years of having this podcast. I get a lot of pitches from either individuals wanting to come on or from publicists, and yours truly, truly stood out. I'm curious, do you think that's just a natural talent, or you just maybe put in time and effort and empathy and compassion in a way that others just don't?
This is a tricky question. It's hard for me to see outside of my own frame, but I will tell you that this was not a talent of mine. I was always a writer, but I didn't figure out how to write in this succinct frame until I worked with journalists. I hired journalists to review my pitches and tell me what about this works and what doesn't work. And they were very honest and forthright and helpful. I did the same thing with other publicists, and I just tweaked the formula and the framework over the years. Uh, and I do think there is an element of me that comes through, which is what I tell all of my clients. When you pitch for yourself, you get to bring your own energy forth.
Hmm.
And I really do care. I love to learn. So listening to podcasts is really easy for me because I can always find a nugget to apply to my life.
Hmm.
And so when I tell you that I learned something and that it mattered to me, I really mean it. And
Yeah.
I give that as a gift, I find, to
Hmm.
podcast hosts, even to the ones that don't answer me. If they read it and they acknowledge it, they know that they made an impact, that's enough for me. I will get other yeses. I'm not worried about it. Over the years, I've learned it's a volume game, truly. I will get other yeses.
Okay, speaking of it being a volume game, I was actually having a mastermind call with some of my clients yesterday, and they both had a little bit of a fear of like emailing too much, following up too much, whether it's with a potential client or if we were talking about the media. So, what do you say to people who get nervous or worried about bothering others?
Mm, I would say, can we look at our internalized, like, patriarchal mindset? Like, there's so much internalized oppression in us that makes us hesitate to ask for more, to ask for attention, to ask for help. And all of those are keeping us from making the impact that we so desperately want to make, that we feel in our bodies we're meant to make. And so I would just ask these people to say, why do you think that? Can you consider a time when someone reached out to you and you were so grateful? or a time when you were brave enough to make the ask, even at the risk of bothering somebody. What magic was made on the other side of that ask? I think there's so much to be learned here if we look at the history of our lives and consider, it's not always bad. And if I'm bothering someone, likely they aren't the person for me. And I do have like an etiquette rule around follow-ups. Not all publicists think this way, but I have a rule of one pitch, two follow-ups. So it's a rule of three. The first follow-up is always, hey, did you have a chance to vet this guest? Thanks for your time either way. It's super short. Second follow-up is always, uh, I am following up one final time in the event that you've been too slammed to respond, but want to connect with this guest. If I don't hear back, no worries either way. I'll take that as a no. And I let that close the conversation, let that close the energetic chord so that I can move on and they can move on, and everybody saves a few keystrokes.
I love that. And truly, for those of you listening, that goes with potential clients as well. I mean, if we're having a direct conversation, right? Direct outreach, not an email list. If it's an email list, send more. But yes, direct. I love that. The rule of three. That is wonderful. So for those who are thinking, I actually would like to have my voice represented, whether it's on a podcast or media, but I just don't know if I'm ready. Like, how do you know when you're ready to have your voice amplified?
Hmm. I do think ready is a layered topic, right? Because you could be ready for maybe really niche, engaged small audiences, but not ready for like the School of Greatness with Lewis Howes, just as a random example.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a fan of that show per se. Uh, so I would say start small if you want and start safe and see how you feel, right? See how your nervous system reacts to that kind of stimulation where you're telling your story and you get a feel for what's going on inside of you. Start with who you know, or you can even ask a friend, I say, to role play with you. Pretend you're interviewing me about this topic and see what comes out of you. Maybe record it so you can listen back and hear yourself. We are always taking incremental steps to build our confidence in the direction of visibility. And it spirals up and it spirals out, I think. Right? So as we like build those bricks up, we can say, oh, like now I'm high enough where I feel comfortable pitching Jenna Kutcher now. And if she says no, great, but I feel like I have the expertise and I have the knowledge set to make this work. So there is some initial excavation that we have to go through, right? What do I have to say? How does it measure up to what else is out there in this space? What makes it unique or different? How can I put my imprint on it? And then trying, because there's never a situation in which you pitch and it's all perfect and it's right forever. You're going to have some missteps. You're going to walk two steps forward and one step backwards. Like you just have to keep trying. Persistence is really what makes the difference when it comes to getting visible.
And going back to the volume and the numbers game, is there like would you say you need to pitch at least this many before you're like, I give up. No one likes me. Right? Like because people get in their heads.
Yeah.
But I just know from like how many people pitch me or even when I pitch others, like I don't know what the percentage would be, but I always assume that it's going to be like 10, 25% maybe. Like you really do have to ask for a lot more than you're going to get and it's not personal.
Yes, I'm definitely a conversion nerd here because I want to know that I'm doing a good job with my clients because PR is really intangible. So
Hmm.
I tell my clients that for every 10 pitches that we send, you can expect about one yes. That's about what's average these days. It used to
Yep.
be higher. There's more competition and saturation there used to be. So we're seeing about one for every 10. If you pitch yourself, you might find a higher number just because you're coming in on your own and people respond sometimes better, depending on the audience, to the person pitching themselves rather than a third party. So
Hmm.
depending on who you're pitching. And then I would say it's a personal number. So people who are pitching book proposals or they're pitching manuscripts like writers, they'll tell themselves, I will pitch 100 agents or I will pitch 100 of these publishing houses before I quit. And so You can create your own number and then say, if after 50 pitches I haven't seen the needle move, I will either hire someone or find a different strategy or switch things up. Just you're making your own baseline here.
So, with the different types of media placements that you do and that you see, do they serve different purposes, or is it always about positioning and credibility? Is it about marketing and sales? How do you view the placements?
Yeah, so I like to play with podcasts because they're so conversion effective. I found in the past, and this is what I hear from lots of my publicist friends and clients, that they lead to email subscribers, they lead to individual sales, they lead to applications and enrollments. And book sales too. So there's just a really strong correlation between having this long form, intimate discussion and people actually opening their wallets to buy or clicking to subscribe to your email list. It's hard not to feel connected to a person you've just listened to for 45 minutes, especially if you stayed on.
I often have a lot of clients, they're like, should I start a podcast? And I'm like, well, you could. And there's definitely, I mean, benefit to doing that. But also, part of it's what are your goals? But truly being a guest on someone else's podcast gives you a brand new audience every single week, as opposed to right? Like, as opposed to attracting, you're going to someone else's built-in audience.
Yeah, and lots of podcasters will take the strategy of pitching two podcasts for guest appearances to grow their own podcast. So there really is a lot of benefit here of guesting on other people's shows. And also, you get to build relationships, which is so wonderful in a space where we are siloed and often lonely. So, you get a
Yes.
chance to find like minded souls to build rapport and to create those connections that ripple out into so many other opportunities.
So how do you even go about, because there are so many podcasts now, how do you even go about researching where you might want to be? Because often think that sometimes we just limit ourselves to who's in our niche or what we listen to. And oftentimes there are so many other places out there that you probably aren't even aware of that could benefit from your message and your service. So how do you go
Yes.
about that?
So, I have two main ways of research. And I'll tell you about the one I don't use first. So the first one is that you can use a service like Podchaser or any other aggregate of podcast listings to like search your category, audience size, to do filters to find a list of podcasts. I don't use that because the podcasts are usually outdated, out of production, or they don't take guests. So I'm really like looking for needles in the haystack here, and it's not useful for my time. So instead, I use two methods. The first is that I look for authors who have recently published books who are in my client's category, and I search them using Apple Podcasts as my search engine. And I look to see what shows they've been on. And that's really a treasure trove. I can get a lot done just from that one type of search. And maybe I'll make a list of like 5 to 10 authors if I really want to make a wide list. The second thing that I'll do is I'll look for other people in my field who are complementary and adjacent to the expertise of my client or myself, and I'll search for them in Apple Podcasts. So I'm just looking to see what shows have they been on. The ones who are doing PR podcast tours, it's gold. You get so many shows that you can go on. And also you can use the shows that you think you're a good fit for and to see where the guests that have been on that show have been on other shows. So you can really get into a rabbit hole here of finding lots and lots of new shows. I also use Apple Podcasts to see like what's top charted. That's really helpful just to know like what's in the mainstream. And I'll sometimes pitch those shows, but sometimes use them as just as benchmarks to see like what's big right now.
For someone who is thinking that sounds like a lot of work and I don't have time to do that, I mean, that's really where you invest with someone like you, right? Like where you invest with PR so that you're not having to do the research and you're not having to do the pitching.
Yeah, there are some publicists who will make personalized podcast lists for people. So you make a list of like 25 or 50 podcasts with contact info and you're sent on your way to do it yourself.
You do have to do the follow up though. I'm like, look, I love when people want to bootstrap. There's plenty of things that I bootstrap, but I really do think that sometimes when you're just out of your element, it's go ahead and hire the help. And one of the things that I always try to think of when I'm making an investment is if you're looking at like hiring someone in PR versus running, let's say, Facebook ads or something else, in many ways, it is like a form of it's marketing money, even if you're not going on there to directly market because you're looking for a broader audience. And so, looking at it from that perspective, it's not like you're just hiring someone to do the work. You're hiring someone that's got like that strategic lens behind it.
Yeah, because we're going to give you advice like when you're on the podcast, don't just wait till the end to say where to find you or to offer your offering or to mention your opt-in. You want to drop it in about midway through, quarter way through. People drop off all the time. So you want to set in organic ways of delivering your message or telling them where to find you before they're gone. So there are these
Mhm.
things that publicists can bring to the table of like, here's how to be more strategic. Here's how you collect more opt-ins. You're right. And there's a buffer of rejection too, right? Because then you have a third party receiving it for you, and you don't have to confront it in your inbox every day, which could be
That's
demoralizing.
right. That's right. So when you're thinking about the pitch, because I feel like, especially like as someone who receives a lot of pitches, so much of it is did the person who, like when they were pitching me, did they put any thought and care into it? And have they thought through the strategy? Because so many people, it's clear they've never heard my podcast
Mm.
and they just want to access my audience. And it feels, I'm not going to say it's dirty, but it feels very transactional. And it makes me feel like, and I don't take it personal, but it makes me feel as though they don't know my audience because they're always just like your audience will love me. And I'm like, okay, well, why? And what specifically are you wanting to come on and talk about and how would that benefit them? And I'm just curious as to whether it's podcasts or even other media placements, how important it is to really dial in the pitch and the angle as to what the topics could be.
I think it's always important. I am unrelenting about this. I think you should listen to the podcast that you're pitching no matter what. And if you don't have time, you shouldn't be pitching because it's just not worth it. Because number one, what if you don't like the podcast host? And you get on
Right.
the podcast and you're like, this is so awkward. I hate this. What was I thinking? I should listen to the podcast beforehand. So it's not just right for the research, but also like, is this a good fit on a relationship level? Because to your point, this should be relational and not transactional. I'm always trying to push it away from the transaction toward relation and toward mutual flourishing. Because those are my values. That's how I think we should all be interacting, right? A pitch is just an ask. And an ask is between two humans, and I want to honor the other human and their time and their energy. So I research just ruthlessly. That's how I can talk about it. I research ruthlessly. I will search to see if the guest's expertise has been covered on the show before. Really easy. You put the show name in Google, put the guest names in you put the expertise in quotes, and then you can see. So for a guest, I might look somatics, nervous system to see if it's been covered before. If it has, I choose a different angle based on what they've already discussed. And I'll say something like, building on this convo with X person, I could see you and my guest covering these alternate topics, right? So you're adding a fresh perspective rather than being like, they'll cover it better. It's not going to work. And you're also looking for things like, does it seem like this host likes to cover this topic? Am I way off base here, right? Is this even relevant to their lives? You're making some macro decisions, but also some micro decisions in the research process.
Mhm. And any podcast host that's worth a grain of salt cares about their audience. They truly do care. And so recognizing that it's not just a marketing tool for them, but something that they care about. And I think most of us really do try to protect our audiences as well. We don't want to bring someone on who may not share our same values. And you shouldn't want to go on to a podcast that doesn't share your same values. So really
Exactly.
doing that work is so important. So for if someone is an entrepreneur or a service-based professional, like, do you think it's essential that they are on at least a few podcasts, or are we in a day and age where like you don't really have to do that?
on their business model. If they're going for volume, like if they have dreams of writing a book, if the words thought leader have passed through their minds, podcasts are a good place to be on. It helps people have another avenue to research you and get to know you. Because even if you have a few on your press page, it gives people a chance to hear your voice, to hear your story in a different context. And it does add some credibility and clout to your platform, right? Someone else has thought you smart enough to be interviewed. And that does, inside of our bodies, do something for us where we think, oh,
Mhm.
I trust them a little bit more.
I do think too, if you get on a podcast and it's because a lot of times it's so much easier to just answer questions, right? And it feels more conversational. If you have a great interview and it's on someone else's podcast, you never have to do it again, but you can still link to it on your own website. The other podcast is going to love that. And for people who are interested in just getting to know you more, if you have that linked, as you were mentioning, it lets them go hear you talk. And like you can then use that as an asset and marketing tool for a really, really long time. It's a wonderful way, I think, to be relational. And I agree. Not everyone is fit for podcasts, but I think more people are a good fit than think they are. You don't have to be an online business owner or an influencer to be on podcasts. There is just so many opportunities that I think a lot of people miss out on.
Yeah, agreed. And I think you can also, there's so much mileage you can get out of one interview, right? You can cut it into, especially if it's on video, you can cut it into reels for Instagram. You can mention it again in your newsletter. You can just keep bringing this back up. People forget about things. This is why hosts often will bring back up archived episodes as like a refresher or a recast, because content just continues to live for us. And as long as it's aligned with what you're saying now, you can keep using it.
Yeah. It's amazing to me. I look at podcast numbers once a month. I don't geek out on numbers that much. I try not to obsess over anything like that, because sometimes it can feel like a vanity metric as opposed to paying attention to real progress. But my old episodes, from 7 and 8 years ago, because I often will refer to them and people can still search for them, they still get listens. They still get listens. So podcasts truly do live on long, long past the actual recording and release date. So your Substack, will you share more about that? Because you have so many just great tips and tricks that you offer up regularly that I think people who are interested in getting more media, more PR, using their voice, finding some resilience around, putting themselves out there. Will you share what they can find out, how often you're publishing that, and where they can find it?
Yeah, so I have a Substack called Doing It for the Attention, which is just how it sounds. I notice that folks that I work with and that are around me in the online business space have a conflict. They know they have to ask for attention, but they don't feel at ease doing so. So the question that I ask myself is why? And there are so many reasons. It's our oppressive systems, it's the fear of really being seen, it's not knowing what to say and when to say it, lack of confidence. There's all kinds of things that come up on the path to visibility. And we all really care about the world. We are doing creative liberatory work. And so I want to identify how do we close that gap. And I
Mhm.
found that it's through building capacity. So sometimes that's nervous system work. Sometimes that's confidence with practicing incremental steps upward toward visibility. And sometimes that's skill set, how to actually write the pitch. And all of my essays and Q&As and short listicles, they help you close that gap because it does take time. And I want everyone who's doing creative liberatory work to have the widest, largest stage with the biggest megaphone that they can possibly that they can carry, so that we all know what they're up to and how we can help them.
Yeah, and I feel like, with the current administration and just there's so many attempts at silencing right now. And I feel as though it's easy to be worried about speaking up. And that's easy, as right? Like as a white woman, that is super easy for me to say because I don't necessarily, right? Like I'm not going to have the same harm come to me. And so I recognize that. And for those of us who are willing and able to speak out, we need to be louder more than ever. And we have to really, I feel, I don't know how you feel, but like really carry that load even more because the more we are all silenced and the less people are speaking up, that really the easier it is for our voices to be silenced forever.
I mean, that's what they want, right? That's like the
Correct.
entire mechanism of fascism is how can they get us, how can they censor us to the point of self-censorship?
Yeah.
And we're really fighting against that machination right now.
Yes. So we're here to say, let's not self-censor. Let's use our voices. Let's get out there. Cher, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We will put all of the links in the show notes where they can find you. If you are interested in reaching out to Cher to find out if you're like, I think I could actually really use her services, I guarantee you could. We'll put the links in there, but will you share with everyone your website and Instagram for those who are just listening and want to do it real quick?
Yes, I'm only on website right now. So it's
Okay.
ginkgopr.com, ginkgopr.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, give the episode a like and leave a comment below so we can keep the conversation going. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a future episode or announcement. Listening on Apple, Spotify, or another podcast app, you can watch the video and join in the after show conversation by visiting hustleandflowpodcast.com.